Okay, I think we need to make a start. We've got lots to get through and lots of people arranged ready to hopefully give you a good hour and a half of insight and inspiration around the topic of climate change and, more importantly, climate action. So welcome everyone. My name's Glenn Lyons. My day job is the Mott MacDonald Professor of Future Mobility, and I'm partly here in that capacity, but also as the still just President of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation. I've had the absolute pleasure of leading the CIHT Climates Initiative. We launched the report from the initiative on Wednesday this week, and today really is a very important occasion for us all to gather and share something about that report and the journey we went on with you all. And we've got lots of people gathered, as well as the audience, some important people on stage. But first of all, can I just say a special welcome to my good friend and colleague, Annette Smith, who I hope, is sat comfortably in her living room with mum and dad, ready to watch the show. So Annette, we know you're with us in spirit. Thank you to my fellow band members who've been on the journey of the CIHT Climates Initiative. Andrew is here, Janice, and I think Emily is also in the background, and maybe some guest performers that we had along the way. Thank you very much to some particular participants in CIHT Climates who were willing to step forward when I asked them to join the panel for today. So as you can see on screen, and we'll be hearing from them shortly, we have Rachel Crompton, who's Principal Flood Risk Officer, Lancashire County Council. We have Paul Unwin from National Highways, Regional Sponsor, and Grace Smith, Associate Director from WSP, Ravi Grandi, Active Travel Infrastructure Delivery Lead, Transport Scotland, and Helen Archonti, Civil Drainage Engineer from Cowie, UK. Thank you all for being so game to join today's proceeding and do a bit more homework perhaps than you anticipated. And of course, welcome to you, the audience, and indeed to our sponsors and the Chief Executive of CIHT. We'll be hearing from some of those later. With the gathering, I see we've just hit 200 people. I do apologise that the format we have with this webinar means we can't allow all your beautiful faces and voices to enter into the arena, but you should find that the chat bar is at your disposal. I certainly hope that's the case. And if so, please make full use of it. There's also a Q&A function for you to be able to contribute yourselves. Right, let me move on to some slides for you. I hope you can all see that. First of all, just to do a shout out to the band members, the core team for CIHT Climates. I think I've name checked you all already. So whilst I'm fronting up as the gobby lead singer, there are lots of other people who've made this happen. This is what we have in store for you for the hour and a half this afternoon. Once we've completed this introduction, I will go into a presentation for you about the insights and recommendations that have emerged from Climates. Then we'll move to our panel discussion. And during that, whilst I'll be directing some questions at the panel members, if you've got some Q&A points you'd like to feed in, please use the Q&A function, and Janice will be scanning that to bring forward one or two questions if we can within the time from you as well back to the panel. We then have, importantly, some questions for you as the audience. Janice, if you would be kind enough to put the Menti code in the chat bar now, please, all of you out there with your devices, if you could go to menti.com on your browser and enter that code, then later on in the proceedings, not for a while yet, you'll be able to answer 3 questions we have for you. And each of those questions are quite important, I think, in giving us a sense of where we've got to and what you feel the forwards look it should all be about. And then there'll be a sign off and we will finish on time at 2 o'clock. So without further ado, I'd like to head into a brief journey through everything we've been up to and the Climates report. I hope you've already seen the news that the report is out. It's free for everyone to download, and there's the web address, but do search online. It's pretty discoverable via Google. You'll find the report is quite lengthy, which in this day and age you might be surprised at. So your choice is either to get AI to do a summary of it for you in no less than 300 words, or alternatively, you might like to dip into the report. What we've highlighted for you here are various sections that offer different forms of insight, depending on what you're looking for. So you could just focus on boosting your carbon literacy. There's a section that covers that. If you're not familiar with exploring uncertainty and scenario development, dip into that. We've got a selection of scenarios for you about 2035. What should we be doing as a sector? Of course, that's been at the heart of CIHT Climate, but there's a section that fleshes out what our participants had to say on that. We've also given you the list of all the participants in climates at the back of the report, which could be the basis for you to grow your own network professionally. If you didn't take part in climates, thanks for joining the webinar today. And there's still an opportunity from a personal point of view for you to complete the survey, which would give you an experience of the climate's journey. And if you'd like to inspire yourself at a personal level with what you might do to be part of the change-making movement, then there's a whole set of pledges from our participants at the back. For those who aren't familiar with climates, these are the two objectives we had at the start. We wanted to better equip professionals to determine their priorities and actions in the present in the face of future climate change possibilities. We also wanted, as a membership organisation, to voice opinion across our CIHT membership that can inform how the institution champions its climate action theme. At the heart of climates has been an exam question, which all our participants had to answer and did so very gamely. In an uncertain world, what priority actions in highways and transportation should we double down on in the next 3 years to meet the unfolding challenges of climate change as we look out to 2035 and beyond? This is the makeup of both how we ran climates and who took part. And of course, continuing with the theme of a band being on a world tour, we did indeed have tour merch, and some people were lucky recipients of our Climates t-shirt, being proudly modelled by one or two of us in the webinar today. In the full-day workshop format of Climates, we took participants on a journey. We began by exploring how they felt about climate change and its effects, before giving them a deeper dive into the climate change outlook. And then we wheeled out the time machines and sent our scouts out to the year 2035, where they explored and gathered notes on the futures they were experiencing and brought those back to the present day in the room. And that allowed us to start working backwards from 2035 to the late 2020s to ask ourselves the exam question then: what should our priorities in the immediate future be? We returned to the question of how people felt about climate change after a day together, and then people made their personal pledges and we gave a t-shirt away. Numbers sometimes belie the significance of lots of human beings getting together. So there we are, lots of happy faces, happy partly because they'd completed the journey, and in spite of some quite gloomy discoveries during the journey, everyone was in good spirits. Interestingly, and you can run this experiment yourself, if you just try and find news about climate change in the last 7 days, I guarantee you, whenever you do that, there will be 3 big headlines at least that you can find. And we did that for each workshop. So to the question that we asked all our participants at the start, thinking about how you feel today about climate change and its effects, which of the following comes closest to your view? What you can see here at the bottom there, the option "I'm currently very worried about climate change and its effects" was the dominant response for the majority of our participants. Of course, our participants were self-selecting, so perhaps inherently more conscious and concerned about climate change. The figure of 63% is signalling the response at the end of the climate's experience, where, as you can see, not that we're trying to put too much emphasis on the figures themselves, but there was a shift in the course of a day's conversation to people being even more worried. Reasons for being very worried, I'll be brief here. You can perhaps sense for yourself by scanning across the screen, but this summarizes across many hundred participants the feelings they were expressing in answering that question. Now, at the heart of climates was the role of scenario development, exploring the uncertainty about the future. So I want to pause a little bit more on this slide. Those of you who are not familiar with scenario development, the focus is on choosing two critical uncertainties, two factors that are most important and most uncertain in relation to the thing we're concerned about. In this instance, on the x-axis, one critical uncertainty was the global climate change pathway. Would we see a future in 10 years' time where the world together was strongly containing global emissions, bending the emissions curve on a trajectory to an end of century temperature increase compared to pre-industrial times of no more than 1.5 to 2 degrees? Or have we failed to get our act together and we have weakly contained global emissions heading towards much more frightening temperature rises? Meanwhile, at a national level, what about the strength of our national climate action? Climate action in terms of not only mitigation, decarbonisation, but also adaptation and addressing the resilience of our transport networks. As you allow those two to play out, you create 4 scenarios, which is what our participants explored in greater detail. In summary, bottom left, neither the rest of the world or we at a national level get our act together and we exist in shared misery in the future. We may get our act together nationally, but the rest of the world doesn't, in which case a future of righteous hell lies ahead. It may be in harmony, we all work really hard and create a world as one, or it could be that nationally we become something of a free rider while the rest of the world does get its act together, we're stuttering and stumbling and we become a country outcast. The percentage figures you can see on screen are the result of plausibility credits being placed by our participants on each of these 4 scenarios, which were more or less likely to become the future we will discover in 2035. What you can see here is that the scenario expected most likely to unfold is shared misery, followed by righteous hell. In other words, we have little faith in the international prospects ahead. We're less clear about what will be happening nationally. So our participants answered the exam question, and there were, of course, many hundreds. They each had 2 goes at the exam question. And after lots of effort, we synthesized this down into this high-level summary, which you'll see more detail of in the report. And it's depicted in terms of 3 important levels. First of all, the conditions for change that we need to double down on in terms of making sure we can help in highways and transportation, help society survive or thrive for the future ahead. An emphasis there on improved education and communication, covering lots of areas from early years education through to emerging professionals, senior professionals, politicians, the full gamut. We need to see strengthened political resolve. Not easy, but that becomes foundational. And crucially, we need increased sector capacity and capability in highways and transportation to deliver. That moves us up to doubling down on the processes to drive change. We recognise the importance of better engagement and cooperation across the sector and between the sector and government. Many of you will have heard this before, but there were pleas from our participants for stronger and more integrated planning between land use and transport. We need to give greater priority to environment within the appraisal process, which fundamentally informs decision-making that takes place. Stronger procurement requirements. Humans tend to work to rules and try and maximize against their own objectives and goals. So if it's not written into the expectations for those putting work out to tender, it's less likely to deliver. And we need improved carbon accounting. That then moves us to the top most important layer. What are the outcomes that we need to see doubled down on going forwards? Improved maintenance, resilience and adaptation was very clear, on the basis not least that we have little faith in the rest of the world getting its act together sufficiently, so we can expect not only worsening climate change on all scenario fronts, but particularly worsening prospects as we go forwards. Improved quality and priority of sustainable transport, a long-term goal for those of us in the sector, but now more important than ever to double down on. Accelerated adoption of low carbon technologies. As I speak today, there are about 4.5% of the cars on the UK roads that are battery electric vehicles. We still have a long way to go. Bolder use of fiscal measures. How do we make sure that the costs being imposed on society by the way we exercise use of the transport system are being properly addressed in terms of pricing? And doubling down on the reduced need to travel because we now have digital accessibility. I'm going to jump over the pledges because you can delve into those in the report, and I can say it's quite overwhelming when you look at hundreds of them, one after the other, from fellow professionals, people who've committed to say, I'm going to make a difference. And as my good friend Stephen Cragg would say, no snowflake thought it started the avalanche. Now to the important recommendations. They're presented here as a set because there's a real message to be noted there that it's acting as a set of 7 recommendations that we have greatest prospect of really achieving system change. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So we have 2 recommendations in each of those 3 layers, plus a 7th, which actually is the most important central one around professionals. The slides here, which I'm going to share afterwards, obviously have too much detail for us to cover in this presentation, but I want to just draw your attention to the format that we've set out for the recommendations and a highlight for each one to spur on our panel conversation in a moment. So the first one is focused on equipping professionals for climate action. The way we've set out each recommendation is to have that headline, followed by explaining the case for change. Why has this been brought forward as a recommendation? Then the recommendation itself. And rather than just leaving it hanging, we offer in the report a series of thoughts, possible considerations that can help fuel the way we approach enacting these recommendations. The first one is recognizing that we absolutely need to improve professionals' knowledge, skills, mindset, and leadership. That's about becoming more proficient, not just carbon literate, in the areas that we specialize in and work in the sector. But it's also about the resilience we need as professionals in what is a difficult journey ahead for all of us. The second recommendation, and perhaps one that's starting to stand out more and more and be a recurring theme, is that we can't simply keep conveying a message that this is a frighteningly difficult and daunting territory for humanity. We need to recognize and infuse the public, especially, after which we can get more buy-in from politicians. So we need publicly focused, positively oriented storytelling. But critically, if we're brutally honest, we in the transport sector are not the best place to look for excellent communicators. So we need to partner with other sectors that specialize in public engagement. Demonstrating that transport decarbonisation is on track. The Climate Change Committee hold the government to account in the sense of their annual reporting, but we as a sector can double down on the scrutiny constructively that we apply with an expectation that we're keen to hear from government, as the public are, about progress that's being made and where there are difficulties in a transparent and honest way. Processes to drive change. We need more effective working between professionals and government. This essentially is considering and reflecting upon how good we are across the sector in a multiplicity of fora and committees and round tables and working groups in really convening and collaborating in a way that gives clarity of communication through to government in order that we can make progress on specific areas or goals. Appraisal is a big topic, but coming through very clearly from climate's participants was a wish to see reappraising of appraisal to prioritise future well-being. In essence, we need to take a close look at the appraisal process and priorities to see whether or not climate action is being appropriately reflected with the importance it deserves. And lastly, the outcomes we're looking for from change. It may not have escaped your notice that in terms of England, we are all awaiting an integrated national transport strategy from the government. We already have strategies quite recently produced for Scotland and Wales. It's critical that with the emphasis in terms of mission-driven government, for England especially, but for the UK, with a focus on growth, that we nevertheless keep climate action firmly in our sights. It should be a core pillar of that transport strategy. And lastly, pricing that addresses transport's true costs to society. In simple terms, if an oversized vehicle heads into an urban area, pumping out pollution, taking up too much urban space, that's imposing a small cost on everyone else in that urban area, whether it's through air quality, land take, visual intrusion, intimidation, safety issues. And that should be reflected in the price that that person is paying who's chosen to drive that vehicle into the urban area. And so we need to step back and look across our sector and at the transport system to see where existing pricing mechanisms might be used in a more effective, fair and appropriate way. So some closing remarks. I know there are other major issues in the news right now. In fact, every morning I wake up and I'm alarmed by some of them. And I know there's summer sunshine streaming in some of your windows right now, and it may be drawing attention away, but the need for ongoing climate change is nothing short of existential. I'm proud to say that this climate's report uniquely, I think, reflects what hundreds of highways and transportation professionals have to say on this matter. I hope you'll find it provides clear-headed coverage of what is a multifaceted, wicked problem and what needs to be done. As I've said, the 7 recommendations for doubling down on climate action must all be acted upon, and through that, the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts. And please keep our minds on the positive storytelling. We are in an era of populism where disinformation, confusion can very easily cloud the picture just at a time when we need to get public concern and appetite for change on side. And dare I say it to you all gathered today, now is the time for us all to be change makers. And I'd like to close my presentation by some thanks to Neil Johnston, not alone, but for his very strong enthusiasm for CIHT Climates. He liked it so much, he came twice, 2 workshops, and he said this: "These have been some of the most honest workshops I've been in during my career. Those participating were encouraged to be open and candid about their personal and professional views which I found to be freely expressed, sobering, refreshing and inspiring." And I think that speaks very well to the ethos that we try and engender within CIHT and indeed to all of the participants who took part in CIHT Climates. So with that, I would like to return us to the room itself. I hope I'm broadly on time. I think I am, which is remarkable, some of you might think. With that rather whistle-stop tour of the report and the journey we've been on, I'd now like to come to our panel, which I hope are primed and ready. So I'm going to go in the order that I mentioned you all in the introduction. So Rachel, if you'd be kind enough to kick us off, the floor is yours for 3 minutes or so. What have you made of everything?
Thank you very much for inviting me to share in this knowledge exchange, really, Glenn. In my work as a flood risk manager for Lancashire County Council, I have for the last 10 years or so been investigating and learning lessons from flooding to homes, business premises, roads and railway stations, schools and even graveyards, which is a pretty grisly suggestion to contemplate over lunchtime perhaps, but it is one of the realities in this country of extreme rainfall, which I am aware is one of the actual impacts of climate change on our drainage assets. I'm using appropriate language as best I can find it. I am an engineer, so I'm somewhat constrained. I'm using appropriate language and vocabulary to express these changes and impacts to our residents and businesses and other stakeholders in Lancashire. And I'm waiting for all stakeholders to catch up with this understanding of where climate change is taking us so we can have the most effective collaboration. We're not all there yet, and I include some of the significant public authorities in that. And I do find that it's quite an overwhelming task to change the trajectory that the nation and the wider world are currently on. But if you can take my opinion on this, I think that if everyone makes their own changes together, we'll generate a better outcome than if we wait to take a series of big steps together under national direction. And on this basis, we should all do what we can whenever opportunities arise and keep talking and sharing our experiences to encourage others and to find new ideas together. So what will I double down on? I'm still experimenting and finding new, valid and relevant ways to communicate climate change impacts and mitigation options. And I'm encouraging my stakeholders, our residents, elected representatives and drainage authorities and suppliers to firstly each do what they can to minimise and manage their emissions and contribute to climate change mitigation. And also I want them very much to respect that it is happening, and they must try to minimise and manage the effects of climate change on them and the services they give, whilst we wait for a collective effort to work and to adjust the trajectory of climate change. So in terms of your earlier slides, Glenn, I'm trying to address the conditions for change with improved education and communication. And I'm trying to target the outcome of improved maintenance, resilience and adaptation. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Rachel. Just what we were looking for. Paul, I'm going to pass to you now, please.
Thanks, Glenn. And yeah, first of all, I want to start with the reflections from attending the climate's events, which are amazing. And it was really, really important to hear different perspectives from sector colleagues and stakeholders. You remember in Birmingham, we had visually impaired people and people with mobility issues as well. And there's something around inclusion and exclusion in this debate that we really need to address going forward. So climate change is challenging us as a nation, but on a more micro level, personally, and to our families and businesses and individuals, and we all come to those from different perspectives. And it was so pleasing, actually, and so well led, may I add, to you and the band, that what you'd created was an atmosphere where we could disagree agreeably, which is becoming quite a famous phrase now. And I think we need to do more of that, to have more opportunities for considered debate rather than just, the 30-second sound bites that we kind of live in with social media, and those longer debates where we can discuss and work through issues with professionalism, with integrity. So that's what it kind of meant to me. We're talking about the future here, and related to what I've just said, there isn't one future, there are many futures, depending on our perspective, depending where we come from. And there will be winners and there will be losers. I think we must face that. But I think we have a duty as a sector and as professionals to ensure as far as possible, fairness and inclusion and equity, which I think, we all from our professional backgrounds try and bring into our designs. So we have a choice. How do we feel about, and you in your presentation, John, you mentioned it, how do we feel about climate change? Do we feel worried? I think absolutely a lot of us do. We have a choice at that moment, either to switch off and opt out and say, well, my views don't matter, this is going to happen anyway, somebody else's problem. Or, and I'm hopeful, we can switch on and we can take control and join in and collaborate and take ownership. I'm an eternal optimist. Some might say a helpless optimist, but I'd rather be that. I'd rather get involved. I'd rather take control with the great people on this panel and the audience as well, to take ownership and make a difference. So my personal challenge is to engage with industry professionals, and that means academia and our future leaders as well, to share knowledge, to explore collaboration and situation. And I'll end up with my challenge to everybody watching and listening to this. What is your personal challenge you're going to set yourself? Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. Yes, and a good invitation to all of us out there to keep reflecting on what we can do personally to improve things. Grace, can I come to you next?
Yeah. Hi, Glenn. Hi, everyone. As Glenn said, I'm Associate Director at WSP Livable Places. But what Glenn hasn't mentioned, I'm also Chair of the CIHT Northeast and Cumbria. So I started this with a reflection. So I attended the workshop in Newcastle last year. And to be fair, I didn't really know what to expect from the workshop. My concern was it will be full of climate change experts, which I'm clearly not one of them. Or it could be full of climate change denials, which again, I'm not one of them. But in fact, it was really quite good, and the pitch was excellent at the right levels, I thought. It wasn't doom and gloom, and that's generally what people felt after the workshop. And it was buzzing. Generally, it was just buzzing with positive vibes. And even like everybody else, like me, most participants were worried, very worried about climate change and its effects. But similarly, they also felt quite positive. They could still make significant impact. And I think the key message is that it's not too late to make a significant impact. And so personally, what I took from that workshop is that the discussions and it gave me the motivations to do something that make positive actions, both personally and also professionally. And I think key message is that you don't have to be climate change experts to make a real contributions and to make a real change. Now, I did do my homework. I did read the 90 pages of the report, and I'm really glad to see that the report captured revisiting the workshop materials. And to a certain extent, it was a great reminder of the pledges, the personal pledges we made at the workshop. It was also interesting to see the reactions from different workshops all combined together. And some really good points I thought made on the recommendations, on the doubling down recommendations. And some of them I thought that could be really game changers, but it only can be game changers if we brave enough and committed enough to implement them. So yeah, so thank you for inviting me to this to join your discussion panel. I'm really looking forward to hear what other people's take on this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. And I wonder whether you're the first person, apart from me and the other authors, to have read the report cover to cover. Let's see. I hope there's some other people out there who are at least making a start on that. Ravi, can I come to you?
Thanks, Glenn. Good afternoon, everyone. I have a dual role too. I'm also the Vice Chair for CIHT Scotland. Thank you, Glenn, for this brilliant initiative and for bringing so many CIHT members together through climates. I will start with my reflection. For me, it has been such a privilege to take part. I was involved in both the Glasgow workshop, which was a diverse and passionate group, and an online session with members in India. Across both experiences, what really stood out to me was the shared urgency. We know something needs to change, and we know we must be part of that change. So one of the memorable moments from the workshop was when we were asked to travel to the future. I would have never thought of reading this headline in 2035, but it happened last month, where England's cricket players arrive on line bikes to the Oval Ground, or a heat wave in Northwest India. This shows that they're happening now. Also, the exercise at the workshop reminded us to be imaginative, transparent, and honest about what change could look like. So I did read the report too. So the climate's report is a bold and honest reflection of that same urgency. It doesn't just capture where we are, it outlines where we need to go. And then it centers the role of transport professionals in responding to the climate emergency. And it also amplifies the diverse voices and the lived experience that must shape our path forward. So I see this report as a wake-up call, not just within CIHT, but across the entire transport and infrastructure sectors. I think it's a call to reimagine how we work, who we listen to, and what we prioritize. So my hope is that it sparks a broader cultural shift in the profession, as Paul just mentioned, one where sustainability and equity, fair access and inclusion are not treated as optional add-ons, but as a foundational to every project, plan, and policy. So I want to see more organizations embedding this climate action into their core decision making. And sorry. And finally, I hope it inspires the next generation. I would like to see emerging professionals to feel not just the urgency of this challenge, but the opportunity, an opportunity to build careers with purpose, to innovate, to help shape a fairer, cleaner, and greener future, which aligns fully with our Scottish government's commitment to deliver net zero and improve well-being through sustainable transport. So it's a fantastic report, and we need to take the climate action now. And just want to say thanks again for this amazing work and for providing me with this opportunity.
That's
Thank you,
wonderful.
Glenn.
Thank you, Ravi. And just a note of thanks to you personally, and indeed there are others acknowledged in the report. We ran an online workshop focused on India, and I think it's been really exciting. We've had the opportunity in this initiative to reach beyond just the UK, although we've spent a lot of time focused on the UK, and we so need to learn more about the Global South and how it works with we support the Global South with the Global North. So very much grateful to Ravi for you spending the time to inform us and educate us by preparing some materials that kick that workshop off. So thank you for that. Helen, can I come to you next?
Sure. So hi everyone. My name is Helen, and I'm a civil engineer. With a working experience of 4 years approximately, and I'm very passionate about sustainable drainage solution implementation, and hopefully we do our best to provide some innovation too. So in terms of my reflection, first of all, I joined one of the online workshops. And for me, it was an extremely valuable opportunity participating in the CIHT Climate's workshop, connecting with global professionals to discuss about climate change. And why is that? Like engaging with experts from varied backgrounds, highlighted unique challenges, solutions, and share awareness of the climate issues. Another part that it was quite interesting for me was that the majority of the public and an even higher percentage of the professionals among us are fairly or very concerned about climate change. And this is good to see because that's how we're going to start and provide and build change. For me, the highlight of the workshop was to visualize the different scenarios. We analyzed causes and the future outcomes based on actions taken today, making the impact of our choices clear. There is a clear cause-effect relationship, which is neglected, unfortunately, if someone follows the news and the current political scene to capture this feeling. In terms of the report, I can confirm, Glenn, I read it too. And actually, I would like to say a huge thank you to the CIHT team for their daily report, which not only managed to capture the workshop's momentum, but also outline actionable changes and provides clear outcomes. I have to say that the report's independent chapters allow the reader actually to dive into deeper into specific topics, serving as a valuable reference for future work or either future representation in your company, awareness and prompt building competency and skills needed to mitigate climate change. In terms of the wider reaction and impact I would personally hope for, to answer this, I think I would summarize that into a phrase, a call for action. So let's empower change. Awareness equips us with tools to make a difference through daily projects and forward-thinking approaches. Let's build with purpose. By prioritizing climate change, we're not just constructing infrastructure, we're creating a better, more valuable world. And most important, let's leave a legacy. Let's inspire the next generation to innovate and improve, passing on a sustainable future that they can build upon and from their side innovate too. And I would like to close with a very inspiring video that Glenn and the CIHT Climate team share with us, which is a United Nations produced video called "Don't Choose Extinction." It is very inspiring. I totally recommend to you all to go and check. You can find it on YouTube. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helen. That's some beautifully composed words there, and indeed from all of you, really grateful that you spent the time not only doing some homework, but sharing those thoughts. And incidentally, just Helen's reference to the we had 3 videos that we shared during the climates workshops, and we've made sure to link to those in the report, as well as pull out 1 or 2 quotes from the videos. So please do dive in. If you're tempted by what Helen has mentioned there, you can go and see those for yourselves. Right, we are now moving on to some time for some panel discussion. Now, I can see there's some activity in the chat bar. So can I please encourage you as the participants, do feel free to put things in the chat bar and express your own views. I'm conscious you might be feeling you don't have a voice in this webinar in the way that those on stage do. I can see some thought-provoking comments already coming in, a call from Keith Dove that recommending all people should undertake carbon literacy training, as well as that pledge made at a personal level. Wouldn't that be wonderful if that were happening across the length and breadth of our professional sector? An interesting question from Rosita on just wondering if the panel had any thoughts on how to progress the issue, given the recommendation includes strong political leadership, where perhaps that's in doubt. I'll paraphrase that, Rosita, just for now. And so the points in the chat bar continue. So please do contribute in that way. I note also that I think we have had a question, Andy Poole. Thank you for posing a question in the Q&A box. But what I'd like to do, the panel I think can see that as well, but we've got 3 areas I'd like to cover in the conversation with the panel. The first one you've touched upon in some ways already, and you've lived and breathed it, but I wonder to what extent climates has already been of value. I mean, clearly from what you've said, the journey continues, but if in some sense we just said that was it, the report's been done, finished, do you think there's been value in the process, or is the real value still to be realized coming next? I don't know who might like to react first to that. Or indeed, if people in the audience want to put comments in the chat bar for their own reactions to that as participants, many of you.
I'll jump in there, Glenn.
Yeah,
that's
thanks,
okay.
Paul.
Yeah, no, yeah. So a number of headings there. First of all, awareness. Absolutely. If we're not talking about it, then nothing's happening. Debate is really important. So awareness, education, but also to say some of the things we are doing. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom, is it? We are in this sector doing a hell of a lot in this area. I'm National Highways. So what are we doing? We've outlined our own net zero highways plan, our road to net zero 2030, 40, 50. Absolutely recommend you Google that, have a read of that, or look at our National Highways website on that. But we also got our environmental sustainability strategy as well. And I'm sure we'll come to talk about past 2080. So all of us can have a look at that in our own individual organizations of what we're doing. We should be baselining where we are now, because we don't know where we're going until we know where we are now. So there's a number of things that, already we can take away. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Other panel members, would you like to pick up on this?
I'm happy to answer too, if that's okay.
Helen, fire away, Helen.
So for me as a young engineer in the industry, it was an extremely valuable learning opportunity. And I can say that I felt after this workshop that I can apply different factors that I learned from the workshop on my daily job. Now, the big question is, how is that? Give us some practical examples. First of all, in these workshops, we had the opportunity not only to discuss in general, but different colleagues from different backgrounds and levels of expertise. They presented different problems that they faced in their work, and we analyzed in depth how we can handle and mitigate the climate change. So if I could try to summarize it in titles like decarbonization, responsible planning, sustainable drainage solution, proactive leadership, and practical application. And the most important is a lot of the time as engineers, it feels like we have the expertise to make the change, but sometimes without the backup from the government or policies or standards, it's really hard to communicate that to our clients. So I have to say, I feel very proud for being part of CIHT, working towards my chartership, because for young engineers like me, professional bodies like CIHT, that they set a very clear path about the expectations and the skills that we need to uplift. It's really important to create this change for the new generation of engineers.
Thanks, Helen. And I think, yeah, from both of you is that reminder, first of all, that there is a lot going on. I mean, the sad frustration is if we didn't have the urgency associated with this, we could be hugely congratulatory, I think, about how far forward we've been moving as a sector over the last few years, particularly in the UK, but actually not just the UK. Coming back to India, Ravi, we heard some very impressive things about India moving, for example, more broadly from almost nowhere into being the third biggest solar capacity provider, I think, in the world as a country. So there are things going on, and you're right, Helen, the practical examples ultimately really matter and that feeds, I think, into the positive storytelling that, you know, we're able to remind each other and the wider public that change is happening all around them continuously now in the interests of improving the built environment as well as improving resilience and being able to adapt to the changes ahead. Rachel,
If I may add to this,
please do,
as well, to the different scenarios that we start visualizing through the workshop. What is really important is when you're working daily on a project, the very first thing that you're thinking is, okay, how I'm going to meet the standards and satisfy the client, but we forget, how does these actions look in a future scenario? Am I building a more sustainable future scenario? So I think it is a wake-up call to start doing that daily and ask ourselves, are we proud of what we're gonna build?
Yes, thanks, Helen. Rachel, Ravi, Grace, would you like to offer anything on this first question of to what extent has climate's been of value already, or build upon what you've been hearing?
Can I go next?
Good. Rachel and then Ravi.
Thank you. I'd like to comment that I found the workshop experience that I attended in Liverpool to be as inspiring as Helen and the others have all described, in terms of bringing together people from different backgrounds and different experiences and maybe different positions on the climate change awareness spectrum. And I know that my understanding and awareness was lifted, and I'm very pleased to have had that opportunity to contribute to the report, Glenn. I have a little fear that the report needs to go more widely to generate the same enthusiasm and the same commitments more widely, because those of us who attended are not the sum total of our industries. And although we 5 invitees may be spokespeople, we're not necessarily leading or driving change across all spectrums of our industry. And I would encourage you and the CIHT more widely to use the report, find ways of promoting it and presenting those lessons to the widest possible audience.
Thanks, Rachel. Ravi, just before I come to you, that sparked a thought for me. Two points. One is my son points out to me that sometimes when it feels like you're preaching to the choir, and it might be for some of you in the audience, you're thinking, yes, this is one of those gatherings where we're all nodding vigorously to each other in our little bubble. But he says it's not just about preaching to the choir, it's about rallying the choir. And I know there's some very emotional points during the workshops where individual professionals felt that sense of being properly heard in a way they're not in their day jobs. Equally, at the end of the report, those of you who haven't read it, we make reference to a very large international survey of 125 countries, 130,000 people. And what it highlights very powerfully is the majority of the public, the majority of adults would be willing to give up 1% of their income to tackle climate action. even greater majorities expect more of their political leaders in terms of climate action. So one of the things we can do is to take the conversation out there, to give others the confidence to talk themselves, realizing they're not alone, because part of the dilemma here is people think they're the odd one out and they don't want to get too emotionally into the conversation with their friends, family and colleagues when it doesn't feel like anyone else is quite so concerned. But Ravi, back to you.
Thanks, Glenn. I think, it has been a very valuable and inspiring. I think we should make climate adaptation and transport a top priority for both policy and funding. Especially, we are fortunate that we have a refreshed national transport strategy for Scotland because we need to deal with extreme weather and it's actually getting worse. So the personal pledges that we all took is just a reminder that small actions we take also really matter. And again, as you were just saying, we just need to communicate to the wider audience and wider sectors. And then it's only a start. There's a lot to be done in terms of communication itself, which you also mentioned in the report. It's all about communication, making sure that everyone's aware and raise their awareness.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. Grace, I'm going to perhaps line you up ready to think about the next question. I want to move us on, but I'm also, I promise the audience, I am trying to scan what's going on in the chat. So again, thank you for the rich engagement there. I see we're into the comparison with smoking and the analogies, and indeed there are real valuable lessons in learning from parallels and analogies across different areas. I also want to know Andy, who's the first person who's put a question in the Q&A. For those of you who haven't seen it, Andy says, understanding climate issues alone is not enough to solve the challenges we face. How do you see the full breadth of skills needed to justify and implement solutions being developed at the scale and pace required? That includes the skills to communicate well, including those who are skeptical. Now, I think that feeds, Andy, thank you, very well into the broad second question that we had for the panel, which is, are the climate's recommendations too hot to handle or not hot enough? It's a difficult balancing act because we all know that big, ambitious ideas that have no prospect of being delivered are maybe not going to get us moving forwards, but without dreaming big and pushing hard, little tiny steps may not be the strides we need. So, Grace, I don't know whether you feel appropriately primed, if you would be happy to go first on this.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's kind of linked to the points I was about to make before, I think. So the biggest challenge, I'm a civil engineer by background, so obviously a lot of us working quite technical in our sector. So we often found we bogged down into the details and communicate into technical terms to people and so on. I think the biggest challenge is the storytelling. Challenge ourselves how to communicate the benefits to people who are not technical, make the benefits, also the challenges, real and relevant to them. And that itself, I think, a key challenge that we need to improve our skills, as Andy pointed out in his questions, how we communicate with people who are not necessarily within our little bubble, in our little sector. And in terms of what hot, so that's itself, I think that's a big challenge for people who is not used to be talking in simple terms and for not using any technical jargons to explain the point. And the one that is, I think, is going to be hot in terms of, and difficult, probably possibly quite difficult to handle at this stage, is that the fact that we in the environment at the moment that we are competing with a lot of factors at the moment. A lot of people will have different priorities. They might have more urgent priorities than climate change is gradually going back at the back of their mind, really not being the top priority. And so trying to introduce something that, as I said before in my introduction, can be quite game changers, but that's required to be brave and really commitments from everybody. that might be that might be one of the key challenges we have, and competing with other people priorities at the moment. It's not something that cannot be done though. As you said, we could break it down into smaller steps and with the right communications and so on. And we also apply it, we could also break it down to something that is more practical, putting my technical hat on, reminding ourselves that when you design something, and remember about this combination about adaptation and mitigation. Quite often we are engineers, just design something to mitigate problems. We are problem solvers. But we often forget that, okay, you build something, how can it adapt to the environments, the changing environments around it that is beyond our control? And I think that's a challenge for us as the professionals in the sector and probably even other sectors.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. And actually, you're just tracking back to your focus on storytelling and communication. I'm drawn to Andrew Blackburn's very honest and open comment in the chat bar, those of you that have seen it. Andrew says he took part in the workshop, but actually his neurodiversity meant it was very challenging to engage in the way that the workshops unfolded in their form of communication and interaction. And it speaks to Paul's earlier point about fairness and inclusion. And those of you who were at the workshops will know I repeatedly said, this is a wicked problem, isn't it? And this conversation reminds us again of that. But I wonder, when we were all listening to the spending review announcement yesterday, how much was going to go on roads and active travel, but were any of us thinking how much is going on communication? How much is going on recognizing the inclusive agenda behind taking people forwards on the climate action, climate change journey? And so I think there's a lot of work to do there. So if I take your message, Grace, I think it's that it's possibly not hot enough, but it's certainly hot to handle. So it hedges on its answer. Panelists, who else would like to react to one or more of the Paul?
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to concentrate on the first two recommendations, equipping professionals and public focused storytelling and responding really to Andy Paul's great question around that. I think there's a lot we can do. So I'm a lecturer also in a number of universities. I'm on the Civil Engineering Industrial Advisory Board at Coventry University, which is an honor and privilege to do. And we talk to the students and so we have the ability to affect what we teach, what the curriculums say for the future as well. And a lot of that is around professionalism and ethics and explaining really, difficult concepts in words and phrases that my 84-year-old grandmother will understand as well, and not just our acronym speak that we are all used to in our industry, which we're very, very good at. But I think we're seen as, experts, and that has been seen as a bad thing in the past as well. So I think there's something around speaking on a human level to the difficulties, as again, that the extremes in society around exclusion are absolutely facing today, and what we can do tomorrow, and equipping our future leaders to engage in those debates in an inclusive way.
Thank you, Paul. And I've just had a live update from Annette's living room. I'm going to give a big wave out because there are 3 generations I've just heard, all listening and talking enthusiastically about this agenda in today's session. So this is exactly what we're looking for. Time, of course, as I reminded us during the workshops, is not on our side. It's not on our side when we're trying to draw down emissions either. Again, thank you for those in the chat bar, things continuing to feed in there. I'm going to move, and I'm keeping an eye for perhaps Rachel, Helen and Ravi wanting to come in on the next question, which is how challenging or opportune is the timing of this report, given the nature of current affairs? Sometimes we've all heard the phrase, burying bad news. We launched the Climates Report on the same day as the spending review, and I'm not sure all 67 million people were only waiting for the spending review, but even within our sector, there would have been a lot of attention on that for very good reasons. So, but of course, as we've seen in the chat bar, there are some much more difficult geopolitical issues, both at a local level and an international level, that are preoccupying our thinking. So yeah, to maybe Rachel, look at you, and then Helen and Ravi in turn. How challenging or opportunity do you think the timing of this report is, given the context we're operating in?
Like others here, I would want to be optimistic, and I would want to be constructive, and I would want to say, let's make it a good time. Because whilst the spending review was announced earlier this week, I understand that there's a lot of detail still to follow on how to deliver the spending review through the Department for Transport, through DEFRA, the two organisations that we here might recognise as being most closely associated with emissions and the potential for impacting on climate change. But I'm also aware that globally, some of the big challenges we face are driven by climate change. If a family can't feed itself in Africa because the rains have failed for 10 years, then is that family going to stay for another 10 years with no prospect of food and a living? Or is that family going to up sticks and relocate? And are they going to relocate north to Europe? Are they going to be part of some of those bigger geopolitical changes and challenges that are impacting our country? And I suspect yes. And maybe impacting on climate change in the way that we're talking today could have far-reaching impacts on other topics that aren't discussed as climate change effects, but actually are influenced by climate change at their source. So I think we mustn't be downhearted. The climate report is available now. Let's see how to capitalise on now.
That's great. Thank you, Rachel. And it's a really powerful point that all of this is interconnected, and we don't have time to kind of fully plunge into that interconnectivity. But I know from my own kind of social network that social justice, economic progress, environmental sustainability, inclusive culture or not inclusive, all of it is interwoven. Some of the fear that's being sort of promulgated in society is coming from this sense that there's a climate emergency alongside cost of living. And so, as I'm seeing in the chat bar, people now talking about the power of the media. And of course, this is why that set of recommendations have to act as a set, because any one of them becomes less effective by itself. Helen or Ravi, who'd like to jump in first? Who's feeling absolutely primed and ready to go? Go ahead, Helen.
Happy to start. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
Ravi, your go.
Okay, thanks. I think, as you just explained, transportation accounts for the 1/5 of global carbon emissions. So focusing next 3 years on doubling down is actually really urgent and realistic. And then with all this heightened public awareness of climate risk and political pressures, especially on policies like the policy team I work in, active travel, EV infrastructure, net zero investment, I think this report is primed to influence the upcoming policy cycles and also influence the investment decisions that needs to follow the spending review. All the spending review has been announced, but still the decisions still need to be made. So I would say this is actually quite timely.
Great, thanks, Ravi. And Helen, just before I come to you, I'm looking on my screen at Rob and Andrew, just to check, if you wouldn't mind, in the background while Helen's answering, whether or not we have Tom Knight, Mitesh Solanki and Sue Percy lined up being able to contribute, because I know the audience isn't able to switch their microphone or camera on, and I'm hoping those three people are. So if you could just attend to that in the background and I'll come back to it. But Helen, sorry for that pause. Over to you.
No problem. So I think I couldn't agree more with all the previous voices on that. Like, it is extremely challenging right now, considering the political scene, but also their inertia on realizing the bigger problem. I think the majority of them see this problem through wrong lenses, if I might say that, because climate change, as Rachel mentioned, it is very interlinked with the social value, socio-economic parameters. For example, natural disasters, like the frequency of them and the severity of them have been intensified from climate change. And how we predict them? Is there a plan? And definitely there are going to be major consequences there, from which countries may cannot come back, like economically, considering the financial situation currently. But also what I would like to highlight, it is about the inspiration for perseverance, and also to get some motivation from looking globally, what other countries actually are doing. Okay, it might be challenging, but we've seen some other examples like China. They are actually progressing significantly in electric vehicles, solar power, and sustainable energy research, which showing what's possible. And the other thing is, it is a friendly reminder. This is a risk of falling behind. It is extremely disheartening to see so many talented colleagues around us ready to start doing innovation research and talk to the public and to their clients, but they are not backed up by the government. So I think it's a wake-up call, and we need to start.
That's lovely. Some very encouraging, energizing words there, Helen. I appreciate that. Right, look, these conversations, of course, never have enough time in one sense, because we're grappling with something so vast. In fact, I'm reliably informed again by my son that it's called a hyperobject. Climate change is just so multifaceted, and we can't even start to get our hands around it. So time has flown by. What I'd like to do now is move on from the panel discussion. So first of all, just to remind the audience, and it's fantastic what's going on in the chat, but we've got 3 Menti questions coming up for you, and it's really valuable that if you can, you take part in those questions. It's fully anonymous, just to reassure you, and I'm going to ask Janice, who's my colleague working behind the scenes, my band member from the tour, if you could just put the Menti code up in the chat again, Janice, and if people could get their browsers ready for menti.com. We'll come to those questions in a few minutes, but it's my pleasure now to have the opportunity to give some airtime to the 2 organisations alongside CIHT that indeed made climates possible. They breathed life into it right at the beginning, without which we couldn't have really got going in the way we did with so much energy. And that's Mott MacDonald and Ringway. And I'm pleased to say we've got Tom Knight from Mott MacDonald and Mitesh Solanki from Ringway with us today. And I'd like each of them, I'm hoping at this point the technology doesn't fail and their cameras magically turn on and we can see them both perhaps, while each of them take a turn at the microphone. So Tom and Mitesh, are you able to turn your cameras on and come to the stage?
Yes, of course, Glenn. I think
fantastic. Tom
as well, Glenn. Yeah.
Great, good to see you both. Tom, over to you first, if I may.
Oh,
what have you made of all this?
Well, first of all, I would like just to give my thanks, Glenn, for your efforts in pulling all of this together and being the driving force behind it. It's actually been a really timely exercise, and we've seen that over months that it's been going on. I've really loved the discussions that we've been having today, and I was really impressed as I was reading the report, just the sense of urgency which comes across. That phrase, doubling down, we need to deliver on that. So when I look at it, I think about, we know the climate is changing fast, so we'd better do some fast changing ourselves. And we're the professionals, aren't we? It's a collective organisation. So through the power of our collaborations, I think our collective expertise is increasingly being called upon to find those solutions. So the challenge which I see is, should we be reaching ahead and in our mindset projecting ourselves further forward so we can know what might be coming and how we might respond to it? So from a Mott MacDonald point of view, I've been delighted to read the report, and I've been really fascinated by some of the takeaways and pledges towards the back of it. It's just seeing the passion that comes through, but also the sense that as a community of professionals, we're seeking change, we're seeking to do things better, and we're seeking to play our part in finding a solution. So well done to everyone who participated. It's a great piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. And without further ado, can I pass next over to Mitesh?
Thank you, Glenn. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'd just like to start off by saying, Ringway are very glad to jointly sponsor this as well as MacDonald. So thank you for that opportunity. But particular thanks should go to Glenn. He's certainly been the driving force behind this initiative and the heartbeat. I know you've got a big band, but there's always the person you sit at the front, and that's definitely you, Glenn. So particularly thanks and a well done to yourself actually for doing this and pushing all of us along actually and educating us on this journey. I was involved in one of the workshops as well, Glenn, and it's great to see everyone, how we support this and how it has helped not just myself but everybody in that workshop being educated to a level perhaps that we weren't before. There was reference made in the chat about carbon literacy training. I've been on that myself, and this actually complements that quite well. So it's great to see a tool complementing other tools that are out there in the market as well. In terms of where I'm obviously coming in as president, got the hard task of following Glenn. I want to continue with the whole CIHT climate theme that's been started off. I think, Glenn, you made a reference to it, and certainly Grace did, around climate adaptation and resilience. I certainly want to continue on with that. And there's people who have done a lot of work with CIHT previously, people like Dr. Hugh Dimming, who can help us move this along under the banner of CIHT Climate as well. I'm certainly hoping that this is not the end, but the kickstart of many areas of focus to aid the overall desired outcome of CIHT in terms of climate action. So thank you, Glenn, and the team for taking us there.
Thank you very much, Mitesh. Some wonderful words, and it's probably my first chance to say to such a big audience publicly, I'm wishing you the very best of luck, and I know we're in great hands when we get to this time next week, and I know you'll continue to champion these sorts of issues. So Mitesh, Tom, thank you both very much. Just as we go into the Menti questions, I'm just going to read out Stephen Housel. Hi, Stephen. I think I can do this. Since Stephen's asking a question. We don't have time to explore the question, but I think in a sense it's a statement from Stephen. I'm just going to read it out for the audience. The phrase climate change has become a bit of a dog whistle for certain sectors of the media. To avoid this negative reaction, would the phrase energy security be more helpful, as all fossil fuels are by definition finite and for countries like the UK a very poor choice when compared to much greener alternatives? And I think that's just a really good reminder that whilst we can feel technically very impassioned about a lexicon, a phraseology, set of phraseology that we use, and we know what it means, and it's serious and it's important. I think it reminds me why our recommendation on storytelling is not saying we should all get better at storytelling. That may be true, but we need to find the expert storytellers. Those are the carbon literacy trainers, those are the journalists, the performing arts experts, and the like, all of whom in their day job engage with the public. And obviously there are some bright lights within those communities to join up with our own bright lights. Right. In the interest of continuing to time, and amazingly we're bang on time, I'm going to pass over the screen at least to Janice. At this point, you should turn your attention, please. You'll be able to see on screen the answers coming in, but please turn to your devices in terms of Menti. Janice, are you there? Can perhaps first of all have you just pop up and say hello, because you've been one of the star band members.
Hello. Oh yeah, I'm here. We're already seeing a lot of people kind of giving their responses, so I'll share my screen.
Great, thank you. And for those who haven't, please go to Menti. I think the code is in the chat bar, and we'll have a look now. If you can maximize your screen, Janice, to see that. Those of you at your desks, you'll be able to adjust your own view of Teams to get the best view of that. So let's see, we've had over 70 people give that first word or phrase, and we'll try and share this afterwards. It's anonymous, so if you want to say rubbish, waste of time, If you want to say should have been doing something more important instead, that's absolutely fine. You can be as brutally honest as you like, but you can see for yourselves there. I did see, interestingly, one, it's shot around, there was echo chamber. I guess I'll come back to rallying the choir, but you're right, whoever put that we didn't really have, coming back to Grace's point, we didn't have any overt climate skeptics who were saying, I've come to tell you all that you're barking up the wrong tree. But we might have been richer for that, because that whole communication challenge, I think, as Paul said earlier, we need to come together with differences of view in a safe space where we can genuinely be open with one another, reminiscent of what Neil Johnson said in that quote I showed. So let's take a couple more moments. Where are we at? We've had 90 people have a go. I'm going to pause a little bit longer just in case some of you in the audience are still working at accessing Menti. So just as a reminder, you can see on screen the code. It's menti.com you need to go to, and then if you type in those 8 digits, you should find this question on your mobile or on your browser, and you can add your comments too. It's last orders. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we will move on to the next question. But what else can we pick out from here? I suppose inspiring and challenging go together rather well at the heart of that word cloud. The message that came through strongly from climates was a great sense of collective concern, and yet at the same time a determination to move forwards. At the end of the climates report, and some of you on screen have got as far as probably reading that, you'll have seen that we ended with a quote from Gandhi, which is absolutely about, you know, if we all looked at this problem and thought, will I solve it? Well, the answer is no. Will I make a big impact on it by myself? No, not really. But is it the right thing to do? Absolutely yes. And by being the right thing to do, if enough of us believe that, then the collective effect could be inspiring, as that word says right at the middle of the word cloud. Okay, let's move on to the second question, conscious of time. So Janice, that's the next one, and that's for you, the audience. What do we see, sorry, what do you want to voice about the recommendations? Now, I appreciate you've only had a first taste of them, but again, please be honest and candid on this. Any advice you feel you can convey within the small amount of characters that you'll be allowed in your answer. If you were speaking directly to Sue Percy, who we'll be hearing from in a few minutes as CEO, what advice would you like to offer in terms of how we rise up to these recommendations? We being not just CIHT, but the sector as a whole. Janice, I think you're probably quite intentionally hiding the responses at this point so people can do some of their own thinking, but I can see the responses building up very nicely there. But let's take a couple of minutes because this is important territory, so have some thinking time. For those who were in the climates workshops, you probably feel like you're back in that exam again that we put you in. And this will be such valuable information, I hope, that we'll take away at CIHT as part of making sense of what you, our members, and indeed some of our non-members who are also joining us today, I suspect, what you're making of this and what you'd like to see or can advise in terms of those recommendations. Janice, I'm going to suggest when we get up to about 40 responses that we start to see what's on screen while the others are still completing.
39.
Please keep coming. You'll still be able to continue with your answers, but we'll just share some on screen for those who've finished. Okay, so let's start to digest those. Get these out into the mainstream media outlets, encouraging that they're actionable. Thank you. Also, a cautionary note that they're broad, and we on that point had to weigh out very carefully. First of all, we wanted them to be doubling down, not watering down, but also we wanted to give direction, not instruction as such. And so moving the recommendations into action will be for those stakeholders that choose to rise to the challenge. And we're looking for champions around that. Listen and act, get it in the national press and repeat it daily. Absolutely, it would be such a shame if this was a one-week burst, competing with the Chancellor's announcement, and then we moved on to some other topic that distracts our attention. Actions can't just left be on paper. Absolutely, it's the end of the beginning today, really. Could be more emotive. Interesting point there, because of course it ties in with partly who the audience is. I think for those of us who are, if you like, converts to the cause, we might feel there should be stronger emotion, but we're also trying to engage and reach out to those who earlier on in the journey, perhaps, or different constituencies. A lot seems to hinge on government action and direction, which we may or may not get. But let's remember we have or should have a relationship, at least with our civil servant colleagues. Maybe some are on the call today. It's up to us to help improve that context, not just see it as a problem or a challenge. Is CIHT willing to become a campaigning organisation? Now that takes us into the territory of what it means to be a charity and what we can and can't do. But I hope you'll have seen that we've stood tall as an institution with this initiative. And that's in a sense a signal of our intent going forwards. Okay, in the interest of time, and I do apologise, I appreciate we carry scrolling down through these. Let me just give a couple more moments for those who are finishing off their answers. But it is last orders now because I need to keep to time and move on. Okay, that being the case, Janice, can we move on to the final question, which is a closed question, so it's easier to answer. You've got three options. So which do you most agree with in terms of climate action in highways and transportation? Are we already doing as much as we can, or even too much? Do we need to keep ramping up how much action is being taken, or do we need a step change in the action being taken? This is, again, your anonymous view, your honest view. Where are we at right now? Don't let groupthink get the better of you. I'll just allow a couple of minutes for those votes to mount up. Well, just as the votes continue to come in, just as we found with the Climates Initiative, wasn't it wonderful we had over 300 people take part? But our membership of CIHT is over 10,500. The composition of our sector as a whole will be running into hundreds of thousands. Now people are very busy in their day jobs. It's a luxury, someone said, to be able to think about the future. But the big question remains, where is everybody else at on this topic? And this is, in a sense, an encouraging call to arms. The vast majority of you saying we need to absolutely double down. But are you here today giving your time? Are you the outliers in the sector, or are you a voice representative of the majority? Partly that's back to all of us going out from today and being ambassadors for change, allies for change with those out there. Right, thank you for that. I couldn't resist just before Sue joins for the close. And Sue, I'm going to sign off in a moment, and if I may, I'll leave you to offer the final words on the initiative. But I just forgot to show my last slide, which some of you will remember from the climates workshops. It's been my great privilege over the last year as president of CIHT, as well as Mott MacDonald Professor of Future Mobility, to live and breathe my belief that we need to make Earth great again. I guess presidents are allowed to wear caps these days. I'm not suggesting I'm going to pass this one on to Mitesh. That's mine for the keeping, Mitesh, but there we are. So with that, and with just under 5 minutes to go, first of all, thank you all for joining today from my point of view. On behalf of the band, there's so many thank yous, all of you that took part in the workshops, the people that help make the workshops happen, all the hard work back at base, William for setting up today's event, and Rob and the team, Dan in the background. As the names are endless, and our wonderful panel today especially. Thank you for joining, and for all of you. But with that, Sue, I will bow out and pass over to you, if I may. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Glenn, and it's an absolute pleasure to be partaking in this workshop, and I found it really interesting and an engaging session. I want to just say a few words, and I won't take very long because I know people need to get to either lunch or meetings, but I do want to express CIHT's heartfelt thanks to Glenn as the lead singer of the band, for his commitment and passion in leading the project, but also to the core team, the band members, for getting this initiative and report over the line. And that's been no mean feat. My thanks also to everyone that's fed into all of this, be the face-to-face or online workshops, and to the sounding board also for their insights and support. And clearly this wouldn't have happened without the sponsorship from Mott, MacDonald and Ringway. So thank you very much. Now, climates is a really important piece of work for CIHT, and the recommendations provide us with a very clear steer on the way forward for us, but not just for us, for the wider sector. If you look at recommendation 1 in particular, that speaks very much to CIHT's core role in supporting professionals, developing the skills, the knowledge and confidence to positively respond with proactive practical action. The other recommendations will involve CIHT quite clearly, but will involve the wider sector, and we need to work together effectively and I look forward to collaborating and taking these proposals forward with some of you and some of your organisations and others who are not here today. Now, I'm absolutely sure we need to take action. We need to take more action, and we need to take urgent action. And CIHT is committed to playing its part. And this report provides us with a pathway for change making. And following on from this report, CIHT will be actually producing an action plan to turn those recommendations into actions, so that these recommendations have a life and do get embedded and do make a difference. Yes, there is a lot to do, but if not us or our sector, then who? This is our collective challenge, which we all need to embrace, action and own. And I hope all of you will get behind CIHT and behind us in taking these actions forward. So I'd just like to thank everyone for all your input, your participation, for being generous with your thoughts, and for all the things that you've contributed to the CIHT Climates Initiative. And I think that's a close for me. So I'm bringing this concert to a close. Thank you all very much, and have a really good Friday and weekend. Bye for now.